Genesis 39. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph, so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome. And after a while his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. With me in charge, he told her, "My master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him this story. "That Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me, but as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." When his master heard the story his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me," he burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Genesis 40. Sometime later the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, "In my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." "This is what it means," Joseph said to him. "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." "This is what it means," Joseph said. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away your flesh." Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he impaled the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him.
Hi guys, welcome back to God's Faith and Love, where we pick something interesting or something that stands out to us as we read the Bible. Today we are in chapter 39 and chapter 40, and in chapter 39, this is what I find interesting, starting in verse 2. "The Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master." Verse 3. When his master saw the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he had done. And then you go to verse 6. "So he left in Joseph everything that he had, with Joseph in charge. He did not consider himself with anything except the food he ate." So this is about Potiphar, and Potiphar was in charge of Pharaoh's guards, and Potiphar bought Joseph as a slave. And Potiphar realized that Joseph was successful under Joseph was very successful, and that God was with Joseph, and Potiphar realized that, so he was able to take control of everything that Potiphar owned, and it was successful because God was with Joseph always, and Joseph always had faith in God during this time. So that's what I found interesting in verse 39. And then chapter 40 in Genesis, this is what I found interesting, starting in verse 8. "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there was no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, Do not interpretations belonging to God? Tell me your dreams." Then verse 13. "Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hands, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer." And then verse 19. "Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and hands and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat away your flesh." So This is interesting. This is two different stories. One's about the cupbearer and one's about the bread maker. And then if you continue reading, this is verse 20. Now the third day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast to all his officials. He filled up his hands to the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. So they were released from prison. He restored the chief baker to his position so that once again he put the cup into Pharaoh's hands. Verse 22. But he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. So this was on Pharaoh's birthday. It was 3 days before Pharaoh's birthday, and the cupbearer got released and was able to serve the cup back to Pharaoh. And the chief baker got hanged on Pharaoh's birthday, and the birds ate away his flesh. So this is what I found interesting about these two stories, is that they were in prison during this time, and during prison both of them had a dream, and both of them said there was no one to interpretation them. And here goes Joseph. God gave him a gift to interpret dreams, and here he is, even in prison, doing God's will in prison, and giving us two very good stories that even though like Joseph was a slave, he was still able to do God's will, even during prison. So this is what I found interesting. Hope you guys have a good day and a blessed day.